Okay, hookworms. Hookworms are equally disgusting, just in a different way. You can see their nice little head area, their anterior end has great little hooks in their mouth. Necator Americanus is the species that we'll probably be discussing the most often. Ancylostoma duodenale is also another common species. They feed on your blood, so they don't actually eat any of your intestinal material. They actually feed on your blood. They can cause severe anemia if you have a high load of these worms in your intestines. These hookworms are common human parasites in the southeast, again, because of, well, actually, because of the way that their life cycle works. The environment is more conducive to them. About a quarter of the people in the world are infected with hookworms. These are actually quite a difficult worm to get rid of. If your pet ends up with hookworm, they are very challenging to get rid of. The eggs will hatch outside the body and they develop in the soil. So in the southeast, where they don't have winter, it's easier for these parasites to survive. They do survive up here in the winter very easily. They just have a very stable encapsulated capsule that they survive in the soil in the wintertime. But because they are very hardy, Hardy in the soil, they tend not to get destroyed very easily. We've had people at the vet hospital, they would try even to bleach their soil because their dog would continuously get infected. And I do remember one couple, they wound up pouring cement in their backyard, like covering their entire backyard in cement because they could not get rid of the hookworm in their poor dog. So they got rid of all their grass. They got rid of the source. And eventually, yes, it did clear up in that animal, but they sacrificed their yard. Life cycle. They burrow through the skin of an unprotected foot, so animal foot, human foot, and they enter the bloodstream. From the blood, they get into your lungs. Larvae get coughed up and swallowed. And then they get into your intestines, and that's where they can mature and mate. Now here's the general life cycle. We can start down at the foot picture. The larvae burrow into your skin, travel to your lungs, crawl up, you cough them up, they get swallowed, they get into your intestines and mate, and then they feed on your blood. And then the eggs are coming out in the feces, and if it's a dog or another animal, usually that feces ends up in the soil, and that's where the eggs make their rounds again. Here is an example of what it looks like if you walk around barefoot and the hookworms try to burrow into your skin. You can see the track that this worm has left. Causes quite an irritation, and they're called migrating larvae. It causes intense itching and redness at the site where they are burrowing. And it can infect about 40 million people worldwide. Here's another. I know, they're really gross. I'm sorry. But that's what happens when you walk around barefoot. You might want to think twice next summer. Cutaneous larval migrans, that's what this condition is called. Here's another image. That one got quite far in that person's skin. Another image. Here's what their head looks like, so you can see how they just kind of chew their way through. And then a similar adaptation allows them to hang on inside your intestines. Life cycle, starting with the eggs and the feces. I know it's very repetitive, but you should learn these life cycles. But they are in the soil, and you walk around, they penetrate your skin, circulate through your blood, get into your lungs, you cough them up, swallow them, and then they hook into your intestines, feed on your blood, mate, and produce more eggs in your feces. Another diagram, this is the dog hookworm. Okay, Trichinella. This is the next type of roundworm. Trichinella spiralis is the name of this worm. It can infect pigs, bear, dogs, cats, rats, man. In the left-hand picture are some of the cysts that you will see in muscle tissue. They cause a disease called trichinosis. They can live and mate in the intestine of the host. The female with the fertilized eggs release a larva into the bloodstream. And then they leave the bloodstream and burrow into organs and tissues. And here's what they look like after they've burrowed into like muscle tissue, for example. They create cysts. These cysts can be very painful. The humans can get the disease by eating infected pork that's not thoroughly cooked, so please make sure you use a meat thermometer. Here's the life cycle. Let's start with the pig. He's got larvae that have cysts in his meat. He gets butchered, cooked up, but not quite enough. Humans eat it, and the cysts release larvae that burrow into your intestinal wall and mature, and then the adults can release the larvae that travel through your bloodstream, get into your muscles, and create cysts. Trichinella, like I said, is called trichinosis. There's some more larvae in muscle tissue. Symptoms: muscle pain and stiffness. Can be fatal if the cyst forms in the heart. Remember, your heart muscle is a muscle, and that would be one place that these guys could end up. Less than 100 cases a year are found from pork infection, and that's because we have a pretty good standard when it comes to inspection of meat. So luckily it's not a very common thing, but it's good to definitely cook your meat well. Most of the time you get these infections from eating wild game. So if you're one of those people who likes to eat wild game, please make sure you cook that meat very well, because that doesn't typically get inspected the way our beef and pork does, especially if you're the one hunting. Curing, salting, drying, smoking, or microwaving your meat does not consistently kill these worms. So be sure you cook it to that internal temperature that is recommended for that meat. Okay, another gross worm. This is called the guinea worm. This is mostly found in Africa. It's sometimes nicknamed the fiery serpent. And the, let's see, where should we start? We'll start at the 3 o'clock. Larvae can be eaten by small crustaceans. The humans are infected by drinking water that's been contaminated. The larvae mature and the adult worms migrate to the skin. And the female bodies are under the skin. They fill with eggs, and the eggs can break open. The larvae can form little blisters, as you can see in that person's foot. And then the blisters pop, and the larvae are released into the water again. It looks like a really painful, awful disease. I can't imagine getting infected with this one. There's before and after the blister pops. Here's another life cycle showing you the little crustaceans. They're called copepods, and that's like an intermediate host for this particular worm. I do have videos to show you. We won't be watching them right now. I'll show them to you in class in case you have questions. But they can get pretty long. Okay, filarial worms. They are found mainly in the tropics, and it's because of the concentration of mosquitoes that you find there. They live in blood and lymph vessels. This is where you find these guys. They're usually transmitted by the bites of mosquitoes, and the infected person's blood and lymph vessels can become clogged with these worms. It causes swelling in that part of the body. So if it happens in your leg, then your leg swells up. If it happens in your arm swells up. So they can cause a lot of problems, and you'll see in the pictures soon. They cause a disease called elephantitis. There's a Loa Loa disease that's caused by an eye worm, and then there's heartworm disease in dogs, and there's cat heartworm as well. The Wuchereria bancrofti, they live in your lymphatic system. They can obstruct your lymph vessels, and it causes swelling. Your lymph vessels help to drain excess fluid out of your circulatory system. And if these vessels get plugged up, then you get a lot of swelling. And it causes something called elephantitis, which you are going to see pictures of. Now, here are your pictures. And yeah, it just causes intense swelling in the extremities typically, because the worms are blocking up the lymph nodes and the lymph vessels. Here's another worm. They can be up to 4 inches long, and if you think about your blood vessels, they can't really handle something that big. And here's another image of someone's leg. So here's a general life cycle of how these filarial worms are spread. So let's say we start with the person on the left that has adult worms that are living and reproducing in their lymph vessels. So the larvae are in their blood, okay? And then the mosquito, who is going to drink your blood, will suck up some of those larvae. And then the larva can develop into juveniles inside the mosquito. They actually get into the mosquito's salivary gland to mature. Then when the mosquito bites you, they're actually injecting these juveniles into you, because the itching that you feel from a mosquito bite is their saliva. It has an anticoagulant in it. And that's where these juveniles are being injected, is in their saliva into you. And then they migrate to your lymph nodes, mature, and then the cycle continues again. The Loa Loa worm, this one's pretty gross. They can find their way to your eyeball. This is usually found in Africa, once again. The eye worms are closely related to filarial worms and are found in Africa. They can infect humans and baboons. These worms enter the bloodstream and occasionally move across the surface of the eye. That's how they get their name. Here's one of the vectors for passing the Loa Loa worm. Humans are infected when they're bitten by the Loa fly. The larvae mature and crawl around under the skin, especially near your face. The adults mate, produce larvae, which are then picked up by another fly and transmitted to another person. So it's similar to mosquito transmission, just different insect. So here's the life cycle. Let's see, we'll start with the fly. The females produce microfilaria, and they enter the blood when they bite a person. Intermediate host is going to be a horsefly or deer fly. It's infected when it ingests the microfilaria in a blood meal. The microfilaria develop into infective juveniles in the intermediate host. Humans get infected when they're bitten by an infected deer fly. And then the adults occur in subcutaneous tissue or the conjunctiva, the white part of your eye. Females produce the microfilaria again, and then it goes round and round. Here's another awful picture. Okay, so Dirofilaria immitis. This is the dog heartworm, and as you can tell from the images, it is fatal if left untreated. This heart, the left-hand picture just amazes me, that the amount of worms that the animal could actually survive with before it died. That it just is amazing, because these worms live in the cavity, like in the ventricles and the atria of the heart, and they just plug it up, and if they're not destroyed and gotten rid of, then obviously the animal dies. So it's carried by mosquitoes, just like the other filarial worms. Here's the general life cycle. Let's start at the top left. The microfilaria are found in the dog's bloodstream. The vector ingests the microfilaria like the mosquito. They suck up the blood with the little larva in there. The larvae get their way into the salivary glands of the mosquito and mature into infective juveniles. And then when they bite the dog, the juveniles will migrate into the right side of the heart and mature into males and females, and then they produce eggs, and then it continues. Luckily, there is medication. The heartworm, sometimes it's called ivermectin. There might be newer products now even that kill these filaria, the microfilaria, before they have a chance to grow into mature worms. So that's why veterinarians always encourage you to keep them on it year-round sometimes, because even into November, even right now, there's still some mosquitoes around. They don't just live in your yard. They can come into the house too. Luckily, this is a type of worm that doesn't really like to be in humans. So even if you were bitten by a mosquito and injected with these juveniles, your immune system would destroy them pretty much immediately. They don't like human blood for whatever reason, so that's kind of lucky for us because humans have enough parasites that we have to worry about. Okay, so that takes us to the end of our second phylum of parasitic worms, the nematodes. I would like you to take your quiz and see what you remember. So good luck.